My name is Cathy Lee. I'm the head of Center for AI Excellence at the World Economic Forum. A big thank you to the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum for this very timely discussion and for the opportunity to moderate this session as well. Today, we'll focus on how AI infrastructure and its components can best be democratized for developing nations and the global community. We all know that AI promises transformative benefits, but at the same time, there are many barriers still exist. Limited access to advanced compute, energy constraints, talent, and capital requirements as well. So we'll spend the next 40 minutes examining the full AI infrastructure spectrum from silicon to software, from power to platform, bringing together enterprise leaders who have real-world experiences dealing with these real problems. There are operational insights from building the data centers to delivering enterprise workloads and also delivering cloud services across different diverse markets will give us a real-world perspectives on what's really happening and what does it take to break down the barriers. Before we get started, I would like for each of the panelists to just quickly introduce yourself. If you can state your name, your responsibilities with your respective organization, that would be great. Thank you. We'll start with you.
Yeah, I am Sharad Agarwal. I'm Chief Executive Officer of Sify Infinitus Spaces. We are India's third largest data center company, the oldest company to have the data center in the country, 25 years since we have the data centers, and we are working on growing the physical aspect of the infrastructure that will drive the AI transformations.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Partha Ranganathan. I work at Google. I'm a VP Technical Fellow there, where I lead the systems infrastructure. So I have oversight of everything from all the way from data centers to silicon to hardware to cloud. And so we have quite a bit of experience building data centers. So looking forward to the panel.
Hi, lovely to be here with all of you. My name is Mariappan. I'm the Chief Transformation Officer at Rubrik. I actually lead our go-to-market transformation. A lot of you who are not familiar with Rubrik, we're a security and AI operations company, and so come from a long standing data legacy. So a lot of what I do is sort of moving the company into cyber resilience and AI operations.
Happy to be here. My name is Syam Nair. I'm the Chief Product Officer at NetApp. NetApp is one of the largest data storage vendors, storage and data platform. We provide the intelligent data infrastructure both on private cloud as well as on public clouds for most of the largest enterprises.
Hi, good afternoon. Sachit Ahuja, President of Tillman Global Holdings. We're a global owner, operator, investor in digital infrastructure across things from cell towers, fiber networks, small cells, and AI infrastructure, including data centers. We've been investing in the U.S.-India corridor for almost 2 years now, and very much looking forward to this discussion.
Right. Indeed, we have a full spectrum of AI infrastructure builders. Very much looking forward to the discussion. So we'll kick off with one opening question to all of you. In your opinion, what are the biggest barriers today to truly universal access to AI resources? Energy, data, talent, infrastructure, compute, and what does it take for US and India to work together to lower that entry barrier? We'll start with you, Sharad.
I would say not too much of, I won't say there are barriers, there are challenges. Everything related with infrastructure, that is whether it availability of energy, or availability of the energy in a ways that it could be accelerated, the availability of talent, availability of technology and innovation, or work towards that so that we could improve the time to market. Infrastructure should not become the constraint for the growth of the overall AI transformation or AI setup. So I would say that these are the challenges in front of us, and bringing that, meeting those challenges or solving those problems is what will make it work.
Yeah, so I think in terms of challenges, I think we are at a very, very unprecedented time in terms of computing. And the best way to illustrate that is if you look at the demand and supply gap. So AI workloads are exploding. And if you look at the growth rate in AI models, and if you go to the very first transformer model all the way to today's Gemini in Google's case, model sizes and as a proxy computing has been doubling every 3 months. And if you think about computing, we all talk about Moore's law, and computing doubles every 3 years. And so we have this huge exponential gap between, on one hand, we have the demand for computing doubling every 3 months. And on the other hand, you have the supply for computing much, much slower. So that to me is the problem that we have, and it pervades everything. Now, the opportunity that I think is super exciting is we are fundamentally changing all assumptions. I've been working in this space for 3.5 decades now, and every single aspect of system design is being completely rewritten. So if I look at silicon, we used to be in the era of general purpose CPUs with Intel and AMD, and all of a sudden we are now talking about GPUs, tensor processing units, custom silicon accelerators, completely changing stuff. Servers, we are talking about disaggregated servers. Data centers, they used to be these big warehouses which for decades looked the same. And all of a sudden we are completely blowing up all the assumptions and kind of rethinking that. So to me, the opportunity really is, it's a time for radical innovation. And especially in India, how many people have heard of Jugaad innovation here? So most people here. And I think there's this opportunity to really kind of rethink assumptions, and there's some really good potential there.
We'll get into some of those details later. Lisa?
Yeah, look, I think we're in an interesting, unprecedented time, as Partha just shared, right? We have defied Moore's law. We have defied all known rules and rules and playbooks that we've worked with and by. But I think it also is a time where we're seeing digital inequities being amplified. You know, what if anything, we are at a time now that we see enterprises, we see nations having a lot of inertia internally, that they're going to have a very difficult time, one, taking advantage of AI if they don't overcome that inertia. And yet it's also very opportunistic right now, because those digital inequities are going to, create a level playing field for a lot of folks. AI is going to help a lot of organizations and nations actually level that playing field and catch up, because we don't need to continue to transform what is legacy, and we have an opportunity to build something very new today. So I do see it both as, challenge ahead of us, as well as something that's very opportunistic, especially when it comes to, India and the US.
Agreed. Some of markets may have even bigger opportunity given the potential to leapfrog. Syam?
I'll just add to what has been already said here. Look, capital-intensive nature of its supply and demand, these are challenges that we can overcome. One of the other thing in terms of actually getting real value out of AI is the quality of the data as well as the security of the data, because data and talent always were the two big pool of innovation that every enterprise had. But now with AI, the data is becoming the force multiplier. So how do you get that high quality data, reduce and optimize the compute that is required, and as well as how do you secure becomes important. On the India-US one, I think there's been discussion throughout the summit about the 5 layers, like the energy, data, infrastructure, data and compute, then frontier models, and then applications. I think this is where the partnership across enterprises from US and India can help. And India has actually proven this with the digital public infrastructure, whereas the private public partnership has enabled, and it's a leader in that every other country is learning from it. So I think that similarly we can follow the same pattern for AI, and I think AI will be a game changer for all of us.
Sachit?
Maybe just to add, I think one of the big questions is how does each jurisdiction, how does each sovereign regulate the use of AI? And I think that will lead to certain sort of partnerships, certain geopolitical shifts, and ultimately that will lead to views on supply chains, views on capital flows, views on good flows. And I think that's undefined. And so when you're investing in the ecosystem, not all opportunities are created equally, because the regulatory backdrop is different. And in some instances, certain regulators are taking a wait and see approach. certain regulators are taking a preemptive approach, and some have decided to sort of let the markets decide. And I think there's not a, it doesn't matter what the right answer is. It just matters that there's some consistency across the board. Otherwise, it won't be a global playing field when this rollout plays out over the next decade or so.
That's a very interesting point. So I actually wanted to continue to build on that, Sachit. So because your company operates some of the, biggest data centers around the world, and you just talk about some of the regulatory challenges as well. Indeed, because data center investment, we're talking about 20 to 30 year cycle. It's very different from the venture mentality. How, and given all of the uncertainty you talk about, there's also energy related questions, the community response, etc. How would you, like in your day a day in your life, how would you actually deal with those practical challenges, and how do you help companies to plan?
I think to your point, it's not venture investing, and investing in AI infrastructure is also not real estate investing, it's infrastructure investing. And so infrastructure investing like renewables or ports or roads or telecom infrastructure is all about the quality of the cash flows, the quality of the counterparty, and matching the long duration nature of your customer relationship with the long duration of your inputs. Inputs being access to land, access to power, regulatory backdrop. And I think right now the biggest question is access to power. I think power is the biggest constraint, and certainly in a market like the US, it's not a constraint in India today. It could be if all the projections on the deployment of infrastructure play out. But having a reliable long-term path to renewable power and demonstrating that the path to the cost of power actually comes down, because right now the way a lot of data center operators operate is they pass that cost on to their end customer in one way or another. But if the business model for the end customer isn't fully there yet, if the business case isn't defined and the revenue TAM doesn't exist, then ultimately someone else is going to have to eat that. And so both players are going to have to, both the infrastructure provider and let's say a cloud services provider will ultimately have to share the burden of that. It can't all go to the cloud service provider. So I think power will become the biggest constraint. Solving the power problem will be the #1 question. That will make things the most financeable. But it's an infrastructure asset class. It's not venture, as you said. And it needs all those components in place, which means supply needs to meet demand. You can't build ahead of the demand. And particularly and we've seen this in other kind of subsegments of digital infrastructure, when market participants, developers, or investors get ahead of that and start to spend money speculatively, it almost burns the marketplace, and it sort of it disincentivizes people to make further investments. And so I think, particularly with all the hype around AI, all the hype around data centers, at least what we focus on is ensuring that all the sort of typical fundamentals that you have in infrastructure investing remain in place before you start spending significant dollars.
Partha, I'm interested in your perspective as well. Google, multinational, you operate in multiple markets. How do you do that kind of strategic planning based on each country's priorities and also your own need to grow? We see, many of the hyperscalers setting up operations in different regions also to hedge against different type of risks. Any insights you can share?
Yeah, I think Sachit addressed a bunch of the issues already. So first of all, I think we have significant capital expenditure. So last year we had about 90 billion. This year we guided the street to 175 to 185 billion. And at that scale, you got to take a global perspective there. And going to your specific question on best practices, there's a couple of things that I think we have found incredibly valuable. #1, we think about the design holistically, which means we think about everything from what I call mud to cloud, all the way from data centers to the software stack. And so if you think about our TPU solution, right? So we have custom silicon, we start with the chips, and the chips have a bunch of AI-specific innovation, whether it's numerics or high bandwidth memory or whatever, right? And then on top of the chips, we kind of have a bunch of system innovations. We think about liquid cooling, we think about sustainable power delivery, we think about optical networking. And then we take that and then we wrap it in thinking about compute, storage, networking together. How do we think about the compilers? How do we think about open source frameworks like JAX and PyTorch, Kubernetes scheduler, and so on? And that supercomputer, we then kind of wrap it in basically thinking about how do we do model design, model garden applications. So that whole vertical integration and holistic design serves us really well because it gives us a bunch of knobs when we think about the idiosyncrasies that have to be pertaining with each geography and so on, right? So that's number one. The second one, and I'm sure Syam will have more to add to this as well, we think about agile and modular designs. And again, one of the things that is very, very critical to us is at the scale that we operate, the supply chain, and then if you think about the recent tariff stuff that we had as well, the complexity is incredible. And so the only way you can get around the complexity is to start standardizing. And so we are very, very intentional about what we are standardizing and what we are differentiating on. And so having open industry standards that allow us to operate at velocity, that is a second key best practice that I would point to.
Absolutely. That interoperability is very important for different countries and nations as well. I wanted to go to Kavitha. Cybersecurity is one of the main concerns when it comes to data center operations. And earlier in the break, we talked about some of the emerging concepts such as digital embassies, which is shared sovereign AI infrastructure. But none of this will happen until people understand that their data, their operations, their AI workloads are secure. So if you can share some of the practical insights from your work in terms of how is it guaranteed, that would be great.
It's a great question. I think one of the things we're seeing is obviously this geopolitical climate currently, as well as sort of this robust nature of cyber threats, is really driving not just organizations, but entire nations towards, data sovereignty, right? It's become very top of mind. And I think that is really going to, rather than being a constraint, it's actually going to probably shape how AI architectures are going to be built. It's going to create a framework, some level of governance around how we're going to do this for, some level of acceptable or confident use of AI. Because I think what we're seeing in the market, at least, is that, it's a very robust environment. We see an increase in incidents and threats, whether it is inadvertent or malicious, both from threat actors as well as inadvertent sort of AI operations agents going rogue. That is really happening, predominantly. It's happening everywhere, but it's predominantly happening in more unregulated industries. So some level of, framework regulation, and I say now this autonomy around data sovereignty and governance is going to really drive that. At the end of the day, data, that very data that everybody wants to get their hands on, that we want to disintermediate, is that strategic asset, right? And I think those who get this right in terms of how we build these sovereign architectures will be the ones that have control, immense amount of control over sort of economics, the economics, political, as well as sort of innovative might. So a lot of the work that we're doing, here at Rubrik is making sure that not only our sort of stakeholders, our customers, and our supply chains thinking about resilience, right? At the end of the day, we don't ask the question of, is this architecture safe or secure? We want to know if this architecture, these workloads, these applications are resilient, because it's not a question of we're going to be hacked. We will be. It's a question of whether we can continue to maintain uptime and keep running our businesses. And I think that's sort of where we're investing a lot of our efforts around sort of what that control substrate looks like for autonomous operations, right, as we think about AI.
Absolutely. The business continuity is probably one of the most important considerations here. But speaking of data, Syam, how can data management architecture be adapted in regions where you might have limited, bandwidth or data storage?
Oh, thank you. I think one of the things today when we talk about infrastructure, we generally talk about energy, data center, and then VPUs. Critical for AI is having that data infrastructure. And the way I would think about it is across the board, we have to think about an architecture that is efficient, an architecture where locality is enabled, an architecture where there's flexibility. And let me explain. When I say efficient, look, yes, the data needs to move from one to the other. You are consuming bandwidth. you're consuming additional compute capacity. Bringing more of the compute where the data gravity is actually will make many of this efficient so that you can better utilize the GPU. This is how many of the larger enterprises will start to think about that. Number two, quality of the data matters, right? So including cybersecurity elements of it, the more we can actually integrate and build that at the data layer, then you become much more efficient. Number three, there are acceleration. Partha talked about an acceleration from that, but there are software level accelerations that can be done at the data layer, reducing the need to move the data and keeping the data where it is. It also then maps into the locality. Like every country, every enterprise wants to control the data because data is the most precious asset. That's the one that's going to drive their IP, their economy. So having the locality of the data so that the data can remain where it's created, but it can still be utilized for the AI value becomes important. And third is the freedom or the flexibility of choice. Countries and enterprises would need their own private data centers. They would work with sovereign cloud vendors. They would work with hyperscalers. And that actually gives them the choice to start these applications or these transformations where they, without having a lot of capital expenditure, without having all of the needs for this bandwidth, and then slowly bring it to it. So I think if you can think through the lens of an overall architecture from an efficiency, locality, and flexibility standpoint, I think we can conquer the challenges that we're talking about.
Well said. We've been saying at the forum that this AI revolution is no longer just about algorithms. It's very much all the different forces come together, play all together. That's why we call it AI super system. And a super system is only, as strong as its weakest link. So speaking of which, one of the interesting phenomena we've been observing is AI is seen as, such a cutting-edge revolutionary technology. But when it comes to building data centers, many countries started to realize actually they don't have enough electricians, plumbers, and the construction workers to build it. I suspect that, Sharad, you will have some experience in sharing some insights there.
Yep. See, all those factors drive time to market for the data center infrastructure or any infrastructure as much. The biggest challenge or biggest point for any infrastructure is time to market, how fast you can take it, because it's the fundamental elements of everything that will happen on the top. India has close to 1.6 gigawatt worth of data center capacity as of today. And it has come from 0.4 gigawatt that it used to be right around the COVID time. So it's 4 times the capacity. But in a way, it is still 5% of what United States have it, less than 10% of what APAC has it. So it is a lot to be covered. But the good news is that all those elements that you spoke about are not really the constraint for India. There is at least 3 times the data center capacity that is under development. So by 2030, India will be minimum 7 gigawatt. And if all the investments are around and then we are all able to execute, and there is no doubt that there is any challenge, it could be more than 10 gigawatt capacity as well. And then what is driving these factors? Capital is not a challenge. As Sachit mentioned, as long as it's a good quality of assets and a good counterparty, and there is no doubt about the good counterparties, right? So there is the good motivation around that. The big component is then the government, the regulation, the support from the regulation, and the power infrastructure and ability to execute. Government is extremely supportive of the data centers in India. We all understand that the Indian data has to remain in India. Majority of Indian data is still not in India, and that cannot happen without having the data center infrastructure in the country. And therefore, government has gone all hog to ensure that there is ease of doing business. There is enough SOPs available, not in the SOPs in some of the incentives, but in terms of ability to execute faster, getting all the approvals there, getting the transmission infrastructure coming to the land where the data centers have to be created. And then in recent time in the union budget, you have seen that there was one issue related with place of effective management that has been a bother at some point for the global organizations around the tax unclarity on tax. That also been taken care of by providing the 20-year tax holiday. So government is very supportive on that. And then the other part is that the rest of the world is worried about the data center because it may be bringing the carbon footprint, it may be bringing, it may be driving the consumption of the energy in the ways that it could impact the community, and then there could be the lack of enough power available. In India case, it's not a challenge, mainly because there is a surplus capacity, generation capacity, and a lot of new generation capacity is coming from the renewable sources. The renewable sources in the country is so much and inexpensive that many global hyperscalers are using India generation capacities, India solar renewable generation capacity to offset their renewable energy RE100 goals, or to meet those RE100 goals. So power is not a challenge. So in all nutshell, that is my last 10 years of building the data center infrastructure in the country. We are at a time where we are actually able to execute, and we will really be 5 to 10 times in the next 4 to 5 years, and can take care of the whole world's data in India as well.
Well, so I agree on energy front. I think India has unique advantage. When it comes to capital, I would like to challenge, because you said capital isn't a problem. We are talking about 500 billion. You said Google is what, 90 billion on capex this year. Altogether, hyperscalers, I think roughly 500 billion. The investment, based on our own report, I think so far the investment in AI infrastructure since 2010 has been roughly 600 billion, and that's growing at 33% a year to 400 billion per year. That is one of the largest capital allocation in the history. On one hand, you are seeing that, around the world, data center, particularly in the US, I think are running a very low 1.6 vacancy rate. But on the other hand, anything that's at such scale, and especially when it taps into real market, tap into a debt market, could be a concern. Anything any of you would like to comment in terms of the financing? And is there any better financing model? Because in the end, if we do say that AI could become public utility, there needs to be some sort of public-private partnership that's involved. Such.
I think the market, at least as it relates to data center, single projects and a collection of projects, is starting to absorb on the debt side. So the debt capital markets continue to come up with new tools to absorb, whether it's stabilized or built assets that are already cash flowing, or new development. And in the US, you have things like securitization, both asset-backed securitizations and commercial mortgage-backed securitizations, et cetera. You have private placements to insurance capital. You have retail money that is trying to get into private markets. I don't think that's unique to the US. I think that all those channels will become available in all kind of major capital markets. That said, it's a big number. And it's a number that continues to grow. And it's not just independent developers, it's the hyperscalers themselves who are really spending 70, 80% of the lion's share as well. So I think so long as the capital markets continue to innovate, the depth is there. We haven't really tested it yet because a lot of things that have been announced, a lot of capital that's gone into the ground is still in development. And so once those projects come online, the capital that funded those projects needs to be recycled out. I think that's when we'll really see, at least what is the debt, what are the financing markets able to withstand? I don't think we know.
And the one thing I would add is, so not on the financing side, but on the demand side, I started off talking about innovation. And one dark horse that I think is worth thinking about is using AI to optimize AI. And we are seeing incredible efficiencies when you start applying AI to improve how we think about infrastructure, AI for chip design. We've had some phenomenal success in improving velocity, improving cost, AI for cooling, AI for efficiency. So I think that is a dark horse that it's not an exponential that's going to continue. I think you're going to have increasing efficiencies as well.
Well, time flies when a good conversation carries on. I think we're almost at time. I just wanted to leave it to all of you for any closing thoughts you might have, particularly on how India could leverage the AI revolution in the next decade.
As Partha was always saying that AI for AI is the important aspect. So the way for the data centers and the way we are doing is that leverage AI in the infrastructure design, build, and operation as well. So that's the way to forward.
Yeah, I would just say I think it's a time when assumptions are being changed. And so that's a great equalizer when everybody is starting from scratch and rethinking assumptions. And so it's a great chance for us to do some really cool stuff together.
I think just to build on that, it is an incredible time for us all to be here, to be doing this. I mean, not many of us get to live through 2 industrial revolutions in a lifetime between the internet and AI. I think it's pretty cool that we get to do this. But I think it also presents a lot of opportunities, as we've talked about right at the beginning and sort of these closing comments, that it is a great equalizer for a lot of nations and organizations, that AI is going to level the playing field for a lot of things. But the investments, the capital investment, the operational investment is we're going to be playing by very different rules. We don't even have the right frameworks, or like we don't even have a precedence around how to measure the success or efficacy of these AI initiatives. We're seeing tons of capital being poured into AI initiatives. What defines success? So I think in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see what that looks like. What does a successful AI initiative look like at the enterprise level?
Yeah, I think I'll simply say that the world's largest pool of talent and the world's largest pool of innovation between these two countries coming together will be the solution for making it inclusive AI. And the two countries and the population is adopting. So that itself will lead to an evolution and a revolution in terms of how we actually leverage AI.
Sachit?
Just to add to that point, I think India's depth in terms of multicultural backdrop and languages and just the size of the population, I think will allow it, if it leverages AI effectively, to make societal and economic strides in just basic things like agriculture, healthcare, education, implementing laws, doing commerce. So I think India is uniquely positioned. And so the partnership between the U.S. and leveraging U.S. technology, and then leveraging it in the India use case, I think is a great opportunity.
Right. On that positive note of AI as equalizer, I would like to thank our excellent panelists today for this very inspiring discussion. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time and attention. Thank you.